this is the block that this is the block that you'll be doing. Now it's the cat's cradle plus another element to it. So, do you both have the cat's cradle ruler? Okay. All right, so you kind of know how to do that. So let me go. The thing. Yeah.
And I just did mine like 3 days ago, so
Oh.
because I had to keep looking at the instructions, and then I got online at your little online thing, and I'm like, oh, okay.
That's how it goes.
So yeah.
So what I want to show you is when you get your kit, you'll get the two pieces that you'll get will be the A block, the A cut, and the B cut. So, and unfortunately, we ran out of kits for the batik, so you're gonna see a different fabric for this one, but it's still just like this. So your print will be your A cut, your A fabric, the 7.5 by width of fabric. And then you'll get this yellow, which will be your B fabric, 6 inches, 6.5 by 22 inches. So your C is what you're going to add to it. And the C will be this contrast right here. So, pardon?
You put the orange in there?
Yeah, that's the one that I put in there was the orange. So you'll make 8 blocks like this, 4 blocks like this, and then you'll have a 3.5 inch block in each corner. All right? So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to show you with this piece of fabric here, how to cut this so that you get everything you need to get out of it. Because if you go in here and you cut the 2.25 by 22, you're not going to have enough fabric to cut what you need to cut. So what you're going to do, you're going to open this up, and then first of all what I did is I cut off the selvage, and then I cut 2 3.5 inch strips, and from these 2 3.5 inch strips you can then subcut these to get your 4 3.5 inch blocks. So 2 3.5, 2 3.5, and so from this you can then subcut this. So trim off the edge, and then cut these into your 3.5 inch blocks. So that is now your corner blocks, and you can put those aside because you won't need those until you put the block together. And then you're going to go through and you're going to cut the 6 4 by 5 inch rectangles. So you're just going to go through and cut 6 4 inch strips. So just go through 1 2 3 4 5 and 6. Okay, so now you have your 6 strips, and then you'll kind of layer those on top, maybe 3 at a time, and then trim that up to 5 inches. All right, so then you'll have your 4 by 5 inch blocks. So now you'll see what you have left is this. And so you can look at this and say, I need 2 2.25 by 22 inch strips. What am I going to do? But what you're going to do is trim this up. You can cut 3 2.25 inch strips out of this, and it will work. Okay? so with the 3 2¼ inch strips, you're going to use 2 of them. Two. And 3. And so what will happen here is you'll use one of these for the combination of the B and C. So you're going to have, from your B fabric, from your C fabric, you're going to cut a 3 1/4 by 12-inch strip. And so you're going to take one of these and pair it up with your with your C fabric. All right? So the other two, you're going to take your 3 1/4 inch strip that you're going to cut from here, because you need to cut a 3 1/4 and then 8 2-inch squares from here. So you're going to take that and you're going to, I'll just cut this, fold this in half. Trim it here. Cut a 3 1/4 inch strip. And then from the rest of that, you'll cut your 2-inch squares. And we won't do that today, but you'll cut then your 2-inch squares. I have them somewhere here. Yeah. So then your 2-inch squares. So what you can then do is take your 2 strips. Then you're going to lay one down here. You're going to sew along. Then when you get to the end of that one, you're going to take your next one and just lay it down like this. Just sew it together. You don't need to sew these two together. Just sew them. Just continue to sew them down. And then when you go and cut them apart, you need to get 8 2 1/4 inch strips like this from them. And you can get that out of that. So that's how you're going to deal with this right here. And I won't take time to sew this, but you'll just sew this and then press it toward the A fabric so that your seam looks like this. Even though this is the dark, usually we press to the dark. This time you want to press toward this fabric. So you just take this, and then when you get this done, you just press it like that. All right? Does that make sense? Okay. And then you're going to end up with 8 strips that look like this. So then what you're going to do is, where's my, okay, so you'll have these that you've cut apart. What you're going to do is you're going to flip this one so that you're going to sew these two opposite together. So I'll take this and I'll sew this together. They should look like that. And you're going to take your scissors and you're going to put a little slash right in the middle of those two pieces of fabric. So you're going to go and you cut it all the way down to the seam. So that then when you press this, you can press this seam one way and then this seam that way. So then you have a piece that looks like this. So you should end up with 4 of these. I just have 2, but you should end up with 4 like this. And then with this one, you're going to do that same thing. You're going to sew those together like this. Maybe I'll sew these together just to show you. And then you're going to do the same thing with this combination of fabric. Then press. You want to press toward the A. So flip that over and press it this way. So now you have that. And I wanted just to show you really fast, when you go to trim these up or cut them into sections, you always want to have a straight line of your ruler right on that seam line. So that way you'll always know that you're getting a straight cut. The ruler isn't wobbling here or there. So this one, then you'll cut 4 here. Just go along, make sure that line is on your seam line so that you get a nice little parallel cut. You'll do the same thing as this for this, right there, okay? All right? So now what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your cat's cradle, and if you remember this ruler, there's 2 parts to it. There's the part that you use to mark the block with, and then there's the part that you'll use to trim with, is this part right here. So we're gonna take that first part and lay your seam line, place on the seam line. You place that right on your stitching. And then you're gonna take your little marking tool and you're gonna mark that stitching line. You can't see that very well, but you see it enough to be able to stitch that line. You should stitch right through that intersection right here. Alright, so you're going to take one of your 4 by 5 inch squares that you have, place them right sides together, right on top of each other. And if this was this fabric, then it would be like this, with the lines drawn, okay? Now we're gonna sew on that. Sew on that stitching line right there, and I'm gonna actually turn the laser on so you hope if you can see how that line needs to be straight through that intersection there. Heading right toward that intersection right there. Now you're going to use the other side of that ruler to trim with. So you're going to find this right here, your seam allowance, 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to put that line right on your stitching line, and then you're going to cut those 2 apart. And you'll see there's not a whole lot to trim there, but there's a little bit. And then there's your first part of your cast cradle. And now we're going to trim this block up. So you're going to find your 3-inch line, and you're going to put that right on that seam line with the diagonal on this diagonal seam line. And you're going to, oops, trim that up. And then turn it around, find that 3-inch again, points meeting right there with your diagonal right on that seam line, and trim that. So now you've trimmed it to 3.5, and you need to trim it before you do the next step. You can't sew that 2-inch square on there before you trim it, because it'll throw the whole block off. So then you'll find your 2-inch squares, and you're going to put them right on the top there. And you're going to mark that stitching line. And then you're going to sew on that line there, right there. And now you're going to trim this with a 1/4-inch seam. And that's your final step on making that block. Okay? So, when you're going to sew this block together, I have this one. What I think you ought to do is sew 4 of these together, sew these 4 together. I don't have these 4 together. And then sew them together this way. And that way, I think it's easier to kind of match everything up. Instead of sewing rows, sew them in 4, sew them in the, like a 4 patch. Okay? Any other questions?